To rehabilitate the hand, we have to understand the natural way that it's supposed to move. To do that, we need to take a step back and look at the actual architecture of the hand. Now, the hand is pretty complex. It's a series of 27 bones, and that is kind of overwhelming when we're looking at how the hand actually moves. But really, we can break it down into more like systems. So really, it's just a row of carpal bones followed by another row of carpal bones, and then what we call rays. So these are a mixture of metacarpal bones and the phalanges, so the fingers. So the rays are just nice long longitudinal pieces balanced on top of these two rows of bones. Now, the key to hand movement and the fact that we can morph our hand into so many different malleable shapes is ultimately that we have a series of 3 arches. So we have 2 transverse arches and then we have 1 longitudinal arch. So the first arch is made of the distal carpal bones, so the carpal bones that are further away from us. So they connect to the metacarpals, which are sort of the long bones before the fingers, and that runs laterally, gives us some sort of stability and moldability in that shape. And there's the metacarpal phalangeal joint, which is again just where these long bones connect to the actual fingers. And finally, to sort of buttress all of that, we have 1 longitudinal arch, which is the ray, so the metacarpals, and the phalanxes, the fingers, of the second and third fingers. So that sort of gives us a bit of stability in the middle, almost like a keystone. Now, one of the things that I think helps make this a much more stable structure is that your second and third finger are almost fused, like they're really rigidly tight to each other, whereas the other ones have way more movement. Right? Even if you look at your hand, it's like, wow, I can really move everything around these two. And yes, my fingers can move in the second and third space, but the actual metacarpals, the bones below the fingers, very little movement that they can do independently of one another. Okay, so that's broadly speaking what the hand is. Now we can jump into the ways that the wrist actually likes to move. So for whatever reason, say that I want to enhance mobility at the metacarpal phalangeal joint, right? I want to do some sort of movement here. I wouldn't want to be an extension of the wrist because that's where we have the least mobility. It's really tight. Whereas in flexion, I've got way more mobility. It's way less tight. On the flip side, if we're in flexion, abduction and adduction, so those side-to-side movements, are going to be reduced. Now that's how range of motion can be restricted, but what about safe movement? So there's this really interesting phenomenon called tenodesis, where basically we get some passive tension creating movement. So as an example, if you don't try and like create a fist or keep your hand open, if you just try and come in and out of flexion and extension, you'll notice, if you're looking at the screen or you're doing it with your own hand, that naturally your hand, when you come into extension, starts to curl the fingers. This is because we're putting a passive tension on the front side, the palmar side of our hand, and that's going to pull our fingers down into this flexion as we extend. So this is me making a bit of a leap, but to me, this suggests that if we wanted to work on wrist flexion and extension, and if you're anything like me, that's something that you've been wanting to improve, there's always a question in my mind, which is, should I have like a really open, activated, spread hand as I enter extension and flexion? Should I have a fist? Or should I be holding weight? And to me, that's been a bit of an open question, and I've been able to answer it somewhat in terms of not having like a pure flexion or extension movement, like incorporating abduction and adduction. But here I think suggests that if that's the natural way that the hand is going to move, maybe we should just facilitate that. Like if we're doing extension, maybe we should just try and do it with like a fist, whether that's really tightly clenched or perhaps even just kind of loose, like it's happening naturally. And then if we're entering extension, perhaps it should be an open hand, and again, just kind of loose. That is me making a bit of a leap, but I think it's a logical one and something I'm going to experiment with. So again, on this topic of healthy movement, in a previous video I discussed the dart throwers movement, where we're sort of extending and abducting and then flexing and adducting. And that movement was sort of deemed very safe for rehab. I just want to point out here that also it looks like it's helpful even if you have some sort of nerve issue like with carpal tunnel. Basically, it's not going to put much pressure on the median nerve, which is often the thing that gets implicated in carpal tunnel. So again, this looks like a really good movement all around for the wrist. And on that point of nerves, I did learn in what I was reading today, essentially that if you have a nerve injury, it's imminently healable, provided that it still has the sheath covering it. If it's completely severed, it will need surgery. But it's good to know there are actually some cases where you can just heal it naturally. And lastly, just something that I thought was interesting. I've studied a lot of the anatomy, and often the lumbricals are a bit confusing because they're said to do flexion and extension, and that often seems a little perplexing to me. But that is actually accurate, and the reason for this is basically how it loops around the joints. So the lumbricals come in front of the metacarpal phalangeal joints, and then they go behind the interphalangeal joints. So when they activate, they'll extend the phalanxes, the fingers, but they'll flex the hand. For those of you who don't know, I've been learning all of this and much more as a part of my 50 Days to Rebuild challenge, where I read 50 pages of a physio/exercise book and do 50 minutes of exercise in a day in attempts to rehab myself. I've learned all of this from reading Newman's Kinesiology, and this is day 45. Looking at the exercise portion of things, so I've been working on my ankle a lot, trying to essentially stop when I'm doing a calf raise, sort of rocking in or out to the sides. And I've been doing better at this. As of today, it was feeling a lot better, but it did make me realize that I've only been working in one sort of way, which is like this heel raise, and I haven't been doing anything for extension. So I tried to do a bit of a Patrick step, keeping everything in that like closed chain exercise. And again, keeping that same focus of not rocking to either side of the foot. Feels good, even in the Patrick step, so I'm liking how that's going. Looking at the dislocate, so again, really trying to focus on retraction and like breaking the bar, pulling the bar apart. I felt really good, basically up until like a sticking point, and then it feels like I sort of lose tension, it sort of strums away. Also, my elbow is a little sore now, and I can sort of feel that sort of aggravates it. I'm not too sure what to do with my form to prevent that. With the side plank, so again, I'm still not having any knee pain, which is awesome because that was really frustrating. And I'm getting a bit of a better glute squeeze on the right. It's a little difficult on the left, but it's coming along. With the curl up, so I used to focus on sort of trying to move at the sternum, but sort of reverting back to moving at the spine for whatever reason, or like picturing it that way, it's feeling like more of an abdominal like burn, so I'm pretty happy with that. And yeah, that is about it for day 45. I hope you enjoyed learning about the hand, and yeah, thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.